Hey, the next episode in our Greatest Hits collection features Paul Schrimpf, Jeff Gourdji, and Priya Aneja, who shared some provocative predictions about rising consumer and patient expectations, ever-advancing technology, and perennial pressure to reduce costs and increase access. This originally aired in March 2022, but we're resharing it since Paul and Jeff returned this week to offer their predictions for 2025. Let us know what you think.
The flow.
Okay, hey, let's get into the flow. Give it up for our panel today. We've got a real special episode here. We've got Paul, Jeff, and Priya. We're going to let themselves introduce each other here in a moment, but they're all from Profit, a really cool group. I think a lot of you listening already are familiar with Profit and the work they do here in the business transformation space. Zane is here. Zane's in the house. We're going to have just like a total party here, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And let's let you introduce yourselves. We don't need to hear from me anymore. We're going to dive into some really cool predictions, all based on a blog article that you collectively wrote and put out there a few weeks ago. And we really want to hear a little bit more about where these predictions came from and what you're thinking about where healthcare is headed. So with that, Paul, do you want to get started here and then just kind of introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about anything in your bio that we may have missed that listeners would want to know.
Yeah, sure. This will be fun because I get to introduce myself, and normally I give my title, which is the exact same as Jeff and Priya's. So that won't tell you anything unique about me versus the other two. But among us, I'm not the book writer. I kind of dabble more in bite-sized content. I've got my little podcast on the side with microdosing, which is a lot of fun. Learned a long time ago that I get a lot of energy from conversations like this. And with podcasting, it made it very simple. Like, I can record these conversations and share them and we can get more value out of them. So what's not in my bio is I just love this dialogue. When I get off this call and this conversation, I've got, a 10 in energy. So looking forward to this one. And I'll leave it at that. Priya, do you want to do your introduction?
Hey, sure. Great to meet you all on the line here. I'm Priya Aneja. I've been working in healthcare for, a pretty long time, and looking forward to sharing a little bit with all of you around that today.
Well, good. I'm Jeff Gourdji, and I've had the pleasure of working with these two for a long time, and we have spent a lot of time dialoguing with one another. And every once in a while, it dawns on me that someone else might actually find it interesting to hear the three of us riff and ramble. So glad to have the opportunity to do that. I wrote a book, and Jared's listeners know, called Making the Healthcare Shift, Transformation to Consumer Centricity. So this has been a topic of kind of my own personal interest for quite some time, and happy to continue to research the topic, learn about the topic, and share insight when I can on the topic.
Had that book not been written, we may not be having this conversation, because that book got your conversation with healthcare wrapped to our relationship with Jared and our conversation today. It's that powerful.
There you go.
Well, it's great. It's still right here. It's right here in my bookshelf.
Hopefully I sent you that book, Jared. I didn't make you buy it.
I didn't get a copy, Jeff.
All right,
to read it.
I'll hook you up. All you gotta do is promise to read it.
I promise I will. Yes, absolutely.
For sure. See, like I said, party time already. What about, let's break the ice a little bit further, and then we're going to dive right into the predictions here. But can you each tell us something to get you out of bed in the morning? And that can be as literal or as figurative as you want.
I'll go the literal route, which is the need to beat my wife to the treadmill in the morning. Because since the pandemic, we quit the gym, we built our own. We thought that was great, it'd solve all of our problems. But now it means we have to compete to get down in the morning. So I'm usually the early riser, because if I see her rolling, I need to run out of bed and get downstairs and get a treadmill and beat her to it.
I'll be pretty literal too, but I'm going to give a shout out to my favorite local roastery. It's called Cilantro in Connecticut, and they've got just about every kind of coffee, single origin or blend imaginable, and they truly get me out of bed. So that's mine.
Love that. When Jared asked me that question, I said coffee too. So I love it.
I have to go, just the concept of my time. I've learned that once the day starts or goes in the evening, there's other things that's not mine. It's my kids, it's work, it's a text, it's something where I'm at energy. And just getting up early where there's nobody calling me, there's no meetings, and I just got one good hour, usually exercising, maybe it's a walk. I equate it to that scene in Goonies, if for those that know Goonies, where they're in the Noel going, up there is their time, and down here is our time. That first hour of the morning, that's my time, and that gets me out of bed. And if I don't get out of bed, I don't get my time.
Well, props for a movie reference too. So Nice. I like that style points there. Why don't we dive in right here? Because the three of you penned an article here recently that was titled The Healthcare Industry in 2022. It's up on the Profit blog for people to check. Then it's What's Ahead? And it starts off asking if 2022 will be the year that the new normal finally kicks in. And I think that's a fascinating open-ended question that we're all waiting for somebody out there in the ether to answer for us when nobody really knows. But to that end, there were 6 trends in the healthcare industry that the three of you wrote about. And why don't we dive into these? The first one's that we will stop talking about virtual care. And Priya, I think you want to get us started on this one. You want to run through kind of what the prediction is and then any insights to lead up to that for you.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, you all remember a time, I hope you remember a time when cable television and streaming were what we kind of called TV. And now it's just TV. Before we called mobile phones, and now they're just phones. And online retail and e-commerce have now reverted to just being plain old retail.
Sure.
And so we're putting it out there that virtual care is just going to become care. I read a study a couple of years ago that said something like 80% of mid to large size employers had a telehealth solution in place. Only 8% of their employees were using that solution. Fast forwarded today, and it's like 3/5 of all consumers have had a telehealth experience, after the pandemic. And so that's really changed how people think about care. It's not, do I go get physical care? Do I get virtual care? It's all just care. And what way that makes sense to me in the moment in my life and the need state of my life I'm in at that second, that's what really determines how we think about care now. It's a critical and unstoppable trend is the perspective that the three of us have about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because people are still kind of holding on to it, even digital health. And it's sounding very weird to me. It just happened last week, Vive and HIMSS, and Vive is new. And we're all trying to figure out where it fits in the portfolio of healthcare conferences. And somebody goes, oh, is that like the digital health conference? Like, oh, there's digital and non-digital health conferences still. Like, I don't think that's a thing anymore. So we'll see where it goes. I always laughed. We did a virtual care panel early last year, about this time. And Jamie Edwards was on. He was the CEO of Cloudbreak Health. They've got acquired. Now he's the COO of Startup Health. But he's like, when stethoscopes rolled out, God knows when, we didn't call it like StethoCare. Like at some point, it just becomes the new way of care. And that's kind of what, to Priya's point, we're putting out there as a prediction in this coming year.
I'll add one thing to what Paul said. Our clients over at Teladoc are doing some really cool work in this space. They've moved away from just talking about virtual care. They're talking about primary care now, right? Mm-hmm. Primary care isn't something you just get when you go to the doctor's office. That's something that can be delivered through virtual now too. So lots of kind of blending and merging in this space.
I love it. When I think about some of the health systems that I've worked with in the past and stay in touch with, a lot of them now, to all your points, are moving away from talking about the technology itself. They know it's there now, figuring out where do we apply this technology and in more ways, whether it be in primary care, occupational health, for value-based care, things, remote patient monitoring, mental health, you name it. And so definitely think that's a prediction that's going to come true. And I think you also see too, in the organizational structures of especially legacy health systems, that digital piece is becoming more and more ingrained, where you may not actually have a chief digital officer anymore. It's just the strategy officer that's working with IT to ingrain these consumer first modalities across the system. And so I think you guys are spot on.
Yeah. Well, and as more people get comfortable, we are beginning to hate the term hybrid because it means nothing. It's just like, it's not this one, it's that one, it's both. But also knowing that it's not all or nothing. So if you're a surgeon, you're not going to do a lot of virtual surgeries. It's out there. You might do a physical round in the med surg wing, but after that, you can do virtual roundings, so there's a way to kind of balance it. And I think people are beginning to understand it's not a complete digital world or complete physical, but what can be digital, what still needs to be physical, and get that balance right.
Love it. Next on the list, looks like you all made some predictions around labor, which of course isn't an issue at all right now in healthcare. Yeah. Jeff, want to talk to us about that?
Yeah. So, to your point, Zane, this is the topic that everyone's talking about, and
100%.
Increasingly, our clients are saying their biggest barrier is no longer patient volume. It's the talent to service and support it, as you know, and new themes about workplace violence on top of the themes we've all heard about with lack of equipment and overworked, et cetera. But our prediction here is that the key to solving this is going outside of the category, so to speak, right? You can't win the war for talent anymore by fighting over a shrinking pie, right?
Sure.
Some estimate 900,000 nurses are leaving the profession. Physicians are burning out. Non-clinical positions, people are getting, stolen by other talent. So the question is no longer, how do I have a better employee value proposition than the other health system across the town? Or how do I have a better proposition to hire the nursing students coming out than the next person trying to hire those nursing students? That's still part of it. But in the old CPG days, we used to say, the real key is not how do you fight for market share over a shrinking category, it's how do you grow the category.
Sure.
And I think that realization is going to come to the talent war in healthcare. So what does that mean? It means we have to, as health systems looking for talent, they have to make it attractive to work in a health system. One stat from this week's New York Times that was new to me, the number, only 54% of nurses actually work for a health system. They work for large employers. They work for retailers. They work for technology companies. So right off the bat, there's a place to start. How do you make nurses actually want to work for healthcare systems again? Right?
Sure.
But the broader point is, how do you make all kinds of talented people, whether they're administrative professionals, whether they're finance experts, whether they're marketing experts, whether they're clinical workers, want to actually work and be excited about delivering care?
I like that. We had Kelly Gill on the podcast not too long ago. He's a recruiter, and he usually recruits for digital health types of roles. And he spent a lot of time talking to us about not only some of the very tactical things that health systems need to do, but also spoke to us about the culture of health systems probably isn't terribly conducive to hiring the best and the brightest out of Silicon Valley, or even sort of millennials and Gen Zs, right, who are getting into the industry. So curious if you all see that as well in your work.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that, it speaks to thinking about a new competitor for talent, right?
Sure.
And what does it take to get the best and the brightest, right? In some organizations, some of the academic medical centers, for example, they're able to attract the best and the brightest, clinicians. And that's absolutely critical and core to their reputation, right? But for anyone who's an HR professional, a finance professional, a marketing professional, working for a health system isn't necessarily, the top of the mountain. And that's a problem, right?
Sure.
I think everyone on this phone believes anyone listening, this is a noblest of noble professions. So that certainly speaks to the non-clinical. On the clinical side, where the most acute problems are, again, how do we keep people from leaving the profession? How do we grow the category of people that want to work in healthcare rather than just competing for those, and stealing nurses from across town by paying an extra $1.50 or $2 an hour and then having them do the same in reverse?
Yeah, it's compounding in a number of areas. It's easy to go into the hospital space. We're seeing that in spades in the pharmacy area. I think the COVID wave of shortage of pharmacists and techs, and then on top of that, administer the volume of COVID vaccines. You're really seeing a breaking point in that area. And then the other piece is not just the non-clinical, but the non-clinical hourly. So when you walk into your typical hospital, everybody's kind of wearing the same scrubs, but chances are the person doing the cleaning is from Aramark. The person doing the clinical engineering is from Sodexo. The person serving you food is from Compass. And those are really hard to attract because they're competing with the Amazons, the Targets, the Starbucks that are probably winning, although they probably wouldn't say were, the hourly wage worker. But how do we rethink that workforce? How do you drive more automation into your food distribution area? How do you think about fragmented workforces? A great organization out there I've been watching for a while is PartSource. They just got bought by Bain Capital. They're in the clinical engineering space, but it's like it's an Amazon meets Uber drivers for hospital parts that are normally tied up by the Trimedics of the world or through the OEMs for GE Philips. But it's a way to kind of right size a workforce that's a little bit more nimble using digital, as well as, how do we think about digital solutions for some of these? Most people have been talking about, digital is going to replace people. Well, we need people right now. How do we use digital to fill the open spots?
Right. No, I like that. Two anecdotes I'll share. One is health system I'm very familiar with, where I used to work. Actually, I was talking with their pharmacy team, and they were telling me they were losing a lot of their techs to cannabis farms that just pay so much more. And a bunch of their pharmaceutical techs walked off to go and make more money, harvesting cannabis, which is interesting. The second thing I'll share, maybe just as an anecdote, is I still feel like, especially when I talk to like students and people that are trying to get into healthcare or thinking about healthcare, they don't really understand all the different roles that are out there. Like, for example, I had no idea that the current job I'm in or roles that you all have existed when I was in undergrad or even the early days of my graduate degree. So I think the industry needs to do a lot more work at elucidating the fact that there's more than just doctors and nurses in healthcare, but there's all now these cool administrative roles, innovation roles, and frankly, even other clinical roles that people could pursue and do really well in.
Right. And you mentioned something that I'm a fan of in the cracks there, which is nurse practitioners and physician assistants, I think, are underutilized in this new wave of healthcare.
100%.
We are relying on way too many things for physicians. Nurses are overworked, and you've got this immensely talented pool of physician assistants that could be doing more if we kind of got her out of our own way with policies.
100%. Totally agree. And I know there's a lot of internal cultural issues and strife between different roles and hospital systems that contribute to that. Okay, there's so much good stuff in this prediction report. So I want to move on to the next one. Looks like you all have come up with some thoughts around home care and diagnostics. Tell us where you see the industry going there.
Yeah, this is a fun space. Is really what COVID has driven in what we talk about virtual care. It's really this decentralization of healthcare. I mean,
Sure.
Those of us who are in metropolitan areas, you can think of the leading hospital, and that's really a campus. There's really some non-hospital operations where you go there for your doctor's office and labs are done, but you kind of go to that same kind of neighborhood. Whereas now we're seeing more diagnostics being done at home, more lab results being done at home. It's easy to pick on the COVID tests being sent back and things of that nature. That's going to continue to grow. The other piece is compounding this shift is how do we get better therapy and treatment at home? Because normally it's just kind of monitoring and kind of staying on top of what's going on with diagnostics and in getting more out of the home setting. And I think one of the more interesting spaces that really captures what's about to happen is Fresenius, CVS is in the mix, a lot of dialysis shops. Lisa Rometty, head of CVS Kidney Care, will be speaking at Vive in a couple of weeks and be touching on this, but getting dialysis at home. And when you think of chronic kidney care and dialysis centers, when you go on to dialysis and need to do treatment, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and you have to go to a clinic and back, it really wrecks your schedule. So not only do you have a condition that you have to manage, try holding down a full-time job with all of that. But how do we get some of that heavy infrastructure that you get with a, dialysis clinic into the home? And then you can kind of think through all the other things that we could be doing at the home, where it's just not a nurse swinging by and checking on you to make sure that you've taken your meds or that your blood pressure is right. But we begin to do a little bit of an extension of the hospital, a clinic, a physician office. So you're actually getting treatment at home and you're able to kind of maintain some kind of normalcy of your life.
Paul, I'll also just add on to the at-home testing side of things.
Yeah.
I always think back to the example of the woman who founded Modern Fertility, right? Which I think was acquired by Roe. What's so great about the way she's just approached this problem is taking matters into her own hands. The challenge with the fertility situation is it's a chicken and egg situation. You don't get to go and get tested about whether you've got a challenge until it's almost too late. So
Right.
Why not take that and put it back into the consumer's hands? Give them a chance to control the dialogue and the destiny instead of like working through the quagmire of the healthcare system. So just very inspiring example. I think we're going to see lots and lots more of it.
Yeah.
It's happening already. And the bigger players are getting in on it. LabCorp, I think, has bought up a couple of apps in this space that are related to kind of melding the at-home testing and diagnostic kits with tracking too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I see, look at like what Everlywell is doing down out of Texas, and they acquired a more traditional lab to allow them to do more things. And actually, a prediction that Jared and I made at the beginning of our seasons, we talked about, how more and more patients will probably take care into their own hands. And to your point, Priya, it was the sort of at-home lab testing that made me realize that as people want to understand their health proactively and not only seek to fix themselves in the case that they feel there's an issue, but optimize their health. And so, for example, like at some point in the next few days, I plan on ordering Everly Well's at-home men's health testing kit, because I just want to see, I have no idea, where my blood work is at beyond some reports I can't really read from my primary care physician. And so I think that's definitely coming for sure and will be one to watch. And apparently Amazon is rumored to be working on an at-home diagnostic service as well. Probably going to compare it with Amazon Care, or maybe they'll just buy Everly Well or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, I really think we're just starting to see the crest of that wave, and there's a lot more to come there. Okay, so let's dig in. We've got a couple more here to go. This next one, I think Priya, you're taking the lead on this one. It's about behavioral health and how it's evolving to be a standard workforce benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually thinking back to what Paul said at the beginning of this call about needing me time at the beginning of the day. And something I've started to do is use Headspace. And I love it. I love the app. I kind of use it religiously every morning. And it just got me thinking, mental health and behavioral health have evolved so much past kind of thinking of it as just the in-person therapy visit. You've got Talkspace, you've got Sunvelo, you have things like Headspace. So you're hitting meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, text-based therapy. And we're starting to see those enter the benefits plans that are being offered by, major employers. So it's not enough really to just have the EAP anymore that takes you right to, all right, here's an in-person therapy session or 6 sessions or what have you. It comes with this suite now of, additional solutions around that, because mental health or behavioral health, it's not just one kind of, end of the spectrum. There's multifaceted needs along that spectrum, and you've got to be able to cater to all of those things. And they've really come to be, greater awareness of that, I think, in this during COVID and hopefully post-COVID time.
I like that. I think about, almost all the disruptors that I know that are going after sort of the direct to employer market, almost all of them have some type of behavioral health or even addiction component to them, which I think is a massive signal in the market that this thing is, blowing up, so to speak. The other thing I've noticed too, even just, talking to friends, is COVID made people realize that they're mentally more fragile than they could have ever imagined. And I'll be honest, it made me realize that, just not being connected socially to the people I used to be and being a little bit isolated. I thought I was okay, but didn't realize just, how much even the strongest of us who we think are strong need these supports. And so I have a whole new appreciation for that entire space.
I think that's well said, Zane. I would say, there's a slightly cynical perspective that says organizations do things when their short-term and long-term incentives start to line up and point in the same direction, right? I think it's been true, and there's increasingly studies that show long-term investment in behavioral health is good for everybody, right? Reduce the cost of care, make more effective and loyal employees, et cetera, right? But that's betting on a long-term kind of, investment that sometimes is hard to make, right? When you don't see short-term results. I think you put that together with the talent war that's undergoing, right? And all of a sudden now they'll start to line up. I know this is good for me long-term. I can see short-term benefits from doing this. Our prediction is those things together are going to help tip. And that's where we're going to see this really go from being a growing slowly trend to really turbocharging in 2022.
I think you're spot on. All right, next on the list, pharma. What a year or what a couple year they've had. And so curious to see, what your all's predictions are around pharma and data unification in the industry.
Yeah, this is an exciting shift. I think for a long time, and this is a very U.S.-centric topic. A lot of these have a little bit of a center of gravity around the U.S., but so much of our data, and there's no shortage of healthcare data, has been locked up in these little silos and pockets, whether it's pharmacy data, claims data, EMR data, and then it's grouped by that business. What we're seeing is with pharma's need now for real-world evidence, real-world data for both drug development, commercialization, et cetera, it's become more mainstream. And the sidecar that we'll talk to a little bit around health equity, the need to collect and integrate large amounts of data for research has become key, which is finally driving a demand for what we'll call a data market that's helping drive more portability to the data. Now, the funny thing about the word portability is that's what the P stands for in HIPAA. And somewhere along the line, HIPAA rolled out and people thought the P stood for privacy. And either way, it was never intended to be anti-sharing. But for the longest time, we've had data out there and people saying, can we use that data? Well, HIPAA. Like, well, tell me more, because apparently I don't. But it's always been about portability. So we're now seeing HIPAA being used for privacy, but still ensuring good portability of data and usage of data, which is going to allow us to do a lot more in terms of around the clinical research, around the patient experience. And what we found out during this pandemic, a lot better visibility into the U.S. healthcare system. And a lot of that's just spurring from that RWD and RWE space, because we are been starving to drive greater unification in data for years now. So that's the catalyst that we're excited to see in the ripple effect that's going to cause.
I think the only thing I'd add here is that, well, two things. One is that every one of our clients is trying to talk about how they can win with data, right? Sure. Most won't, because right, in the end, someone's going to win and become the dominant force. Or not one person, but there'll be multiple, but certainly not everybody. But the fact that it's on everyone's agenda is, I think, telling. I think the other thing that's been clear for years is that pharma, at least when it comes to patients, has been data poor. They have the rich data in the discovery process, the development process, but then upon commercialization, they're well behind. So I think part of what we think is coming is the move, pharma making a move, right? They've been data poor, but they have increasingly have the incentive through different reimbursement. They have the margins to support it, and we think that's this is the year that we see the move made.
Yeah, you'll see some interesting moves with the big pharma distributors. So keep an eye on McKesson, Cardinal, and AmerisourceBergen, because they've got a lot of good specialty pharma data. You're seeing the EMR companies pivot in that space. But the giants to really watch and see where they're moving, that's going to be Komodo, IQVIA, and Datavant. Will be fun to watch in the next year or two.
Definitely noted. I'll keep that on my list. I'll be honest. Pharmaceuticals isn't always something I completely understand how it all works. It just seems like such a black box to me. That and revenue cycle, I've not spent a whole lot of time studying. Okay. Last but not least, and this topic looks really interesting, this prediction around ESG and it becoming an increasingly uncomfortable topic for healthcare. Tell us about that, Priya.
For sure. So, the trend here is really, if you think back to 2020, ESG was really sort of like a feel-good topic then. And we had a lot of healthcare heroes that we were applauding that year, rightfully so. And there were conversations getting started about access to care and health equity. But 2 years later, it's time to show results. And It's our belief that, senior executives across health systems, across pharma, across payers are going to be asked, why have equity and access not improved more in the wake of the pandemic, and sort of how they're orienting, their purpose. So this purpose-led sort of transformation has become really integral for a lot of our clients. In a space like this, it's just so tough to increase health equity. Thin margins, startups might start to deliver some of that innovation. But when you're a large firm in this space, you're going to be challenged to walk the walk. A good example is of a firm that's kind of making the moves is Common Spirit Health. They made a commitment, I believe, to reach net zero on their emissions by 2040. And I think, as we all know, carbon emissions from healthcare actually represent about 5% of worldwide total. So there's a lot of room for improvement. So we're seeing some companies start to walk the walk. And if they're not yet, I think they will be asked to.
I will intentionally not name any names here, but one of the things that almost makes me laugh, and I try to laugh only on the inside, sometimes regardless of the issue, there's always someone that says, yeah, but what about health equity? And everyone nods, yes, absolutely. Right. But I think there's a need. I think this is the year where at least the progressive organizations, the leading organizations, actually define that specifically for their organization, come up with their own unique take on how they're going to lead in health equity, what it means to their organization. And they're going to narrow it down. They're going to be specific if they're going to be successful. I think we're going to see that start to happen, at least in pockets this year.
Yeah, I used to pick on whenever you saw a firm's value and you saw fun as the last value, it's not a fun place to work. Health equity is kind of that same thing. It's like, we do this and do this and health equity. And it's like, oh, that's going to blow up on you guys. It's just going to blow up.
Yeah. So this topic is interesting to me, especially being a Canadian, and health systems in Canada are funded different, they strategic plan differently. And I just wonder at what point here in the US, will this whole discussion of equity actually make it down to the strategic planning level? Because so many of our health systems, whether they're willing to admit it or not, their first level of decision making is where is their good payer mix? Like where can people pay for our services? And then what is the epidemiological need that we can then sell in those zip codes? So to me, until we are willing to talk about that and maybe find new funding models, work with government and policy to figure that piece out, you fundamentally will never have truly equitable health systems until that's figured out. And I'm not proposing I have the idea to fix it, but just calling it out is something that I've certainly witnessed in my career to date.
It's 100% the dimension. It's when you try to take something that wasn't designed to deliver health equity and reverse engineer it. We're seeing better results in the startup space of people taking on health equity challenges and wrapping innovation and businesses around that. The other one is going to be a lot of activists. Mine that I'm watching right now is in the pharmacy space. It's the hashtag pizza is not working, where you've got activists going, we've got exhausted pharmacists and the cute balloons outside front is not enough for them to hold on. How are we actually rethinking the role and career of pharmacy techs? But you've got some activists going in there and really pushing at the bigger pharmacy players in there. And I know a lot of people on that player, they're not evil people. They're trying to do the right thing. But between kind of starting with the health equity first or activists getting very loud and creating a lot of momentum for more organizations to react to that. But Zane, your points are spot on.
And I'm not saying Canada is even better. It's just different. Like they have a lot of work to do. But when I first started in the US, I'm like, holy smokes, this is so different. Like I knew it would be different, but it struck me wrong. I guess it took a minute.
As we come to a close here, I just want to give everyone one more chance to share with us what's the best place to connect with you, and then remind us of the name of the new podcast and where people can find that.
Yeah, it's Healthcare Transformers is the podcast coming out from the Profit team. You can find us on profit.com or on LinkedIn, Paul Schrimpf, Priya Aneja, and Jeff Gourdji.
Fantastic. Zane, thanks for leading us through this as well. This has been a blast. We've learned so much. This is the whole point of this. Share some provocative thinking. That's just kind of the way we put it. Get us thinking again. Get us thinking in a different way. Help us break down the old ways that we have thought about things. All the topics you guys just walked us through are terrific. I want to thank you again for giving us some time. Stay safe, stay well, and all the best in everything you have going on. And thanks again for joining us today.
A pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Very enjoyable. Definitely do it again.
Had a great time.
Hey, thanks again for listening. We hope you found some value in this conversation. And if you did, do us a favor and follow us using your favorite podcast app. Then tell your friends and colleagues about us. If you like what you heard, please spread the word. Healthcare App is a member of the Shift.Health Content Network. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're going to love the other shows in the Shift.Health Content Network. Go check out the latest show. In fact, it's called Hello Healthcare, hosted by Chris Hemphill. It's focused on people who are moving healthcare forward, how healthcare strategy relates to data and AI, and what you can do to create or demand a better future. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform or at Shift.Health, where all 35 podcasts and video series are free and available on demand. Until next time, keep marketing forward. Thanks. And that's a wrap.